morning, everybody. Good morning. Tutawapatia kahawa by force. Good morning once again. Thank you so much, Harry and the team, for putting this together. My task is very simple, is try to create the context for this summit. And I think the idea that we can actually meet and have a conversation on citizen-centric government, not necessarily a technology conversation, I think is important. Because the idea of smartness is actually being, it's not about technology, but also just being responsive to citizens. Death by slides, I apologize, but it is how it is. So basically, I think I want to really focus around trends, challenges, and prospects of citizen-centric government, especially in the era of the fourth industrial revolution. Of course, by definition, a citizen-centric government is a government that actually focuses on citizens, prioritizes their needs and preferences, figures out how to be efficient, transparent, how to be very focused on the user, but also ensures that government engages with citizens in a way that ensures collaboration. Citizens are not homogeneous, as we always say, and I wanted just to frame in terms of our context. When we talk about citizens in our context, they're in multiple locations, they're in different contexts. You have a farmer, definitely with limited access to the internet and smartphone, but is interested in agriculture services. You have an urban dweller who's tech-savvy. I think majority of you in the room who are very clear around how do they basically register business services. I think CEO has just mentioned how government is rapidly digitizing. But then how do you ensure that these services are accessible to citizens? You have an elderly person in our case who's highly dependent on social protection and conditional cash transfers that are transferred through mobile money, but then without internet and connectivity, there's a challenge there. You have a young person in many ways who's very much around an activist, wants to engage government to amplify their voice. They want open data platforms to hold governments to account. You have a tech entrepreneur who needs just everything that is fast. High internet speed, fast internet connectivity, wants support with a lot of services. And then finally, we saw the president launch the healthcare professionals. You have now a healthcare provider who wants timely and accessible services, but also can engage in digital health services. So just wanted to draw sort of the personas of who this citizen is. But then we live in an era of diminished trust. And this is something I wanted to bring into the fore. 70% of the world currently lives in autocratic regimes. Democracy is receding. Next year, there may be a problem. We may see a tipping point. We have the most elections next year that we've ever had in a very long time. And when we talk about technology and innovation, we know now with generative AI, fake news, misinformation, deepfakes, trust is even diminishing further. The second part, of course, is according to Edelman Trust, sorry, I didn't quote the source in this, is that governments are the least trusted leaders and journalists. The third parties, scientists, are the most trusted, and I think you guess why. Why are scientists trusted? Data, research, evidence, and that's basically the conversation, right? Then the good thing is that our sector, which is the tech sector, is the one that is the most trusted sector. It's a very good thing, which means when we talk about citizen-centric services delivered by government who are most untrusted, leveraging technology that is most trusted, that becomes a game changer. Then finally, and this is also the interesting, and I always tell people this, social media is not the platform to engage citizens because it is the least trusted because of what we are seeing of fake news, misinformation, disinformation. But I think then what we are really asking right now in terms of citizen-centric services when you're leveraging technology, it's about digitizing trust. That's the currency that we need to be peddling on. And so when we look at the current trends as they're emerging, there's of course this whole drive on digital transformation, and the CEO has mentioned it, and Phyllis will go deeper into this. But then there's the also aspect of how do you also ensure that everything is data-driven? We've seen scientists are the most trusted. So how do we leverage on the discipline of science, which is leveraging on research, data for decision-making so that we can engage citizens based on insights? then how do you then ensure that that environment is open? Because citizens want transparency, accountability. They want to be engaged in a way that is open, so that governments can deliver services that are more responsive to citizens. But those citizens now, especially the one that I didn't mention, is the median age, of course, is 19 in Kenya, which means citizens are young and they require very personalized services. And that's what I think technology can do. As much as we are many and diverse, technology can ensure that even in that diversity, we are very targeted in what we do. So what are the challenges beyond just living in an environment of mistrust? The challenges, of course, and we know them now. The issue of privacy and security, because it's many to one, it's a lot of data floating around. In this space, I'm sure we'll hear the fines that have been, we've seen fines being given to some establishments. It will be interesting to hear what the Data Protection Office is talking about that. There's the issue of digital inclusion. We already live in a world of digital exclusion, but also of a digital divide. Even in that divide, there's still a gender divide. There's still a poverty divide. And so how do you ensure that, even as we're looking at digitizing in a very rapid way, that we also remain inclusive? There's also the idea of the culture issue, which is in the middle, and the most reason why government is mistrusted is just because government has been resistant to change. And so how do we ensure that we overcome bureaucracy and tradition? It's just not enough to say we've been doing it this way. I think it's time we begin to change things, and technology can do that in a very rapid way. How do we ensure that we do this within a constrained fiscal space and resource constraints? What technology can do is also in a way that the same way we leapfrog, we can save resources. But also, how do we measure impact? With technology, it's easy to measure almost in near real time whether we are making impact, whether we are pushing the needle, but also being able to course correct without waiting for a whole year to do that. What models are we seeing? And I picked two models here in terms of the characteristics of it. I think the first model we're seeing is that you really must leverage on advanced technologies, and it has to be advanced in terms of how do we integrate AI, Internet of Things, blockchain, because of trust, so that government becomes smarter. The second thing, of course, is that, and I think Kenya has been very good in this, is how do you decentralize government in a way that then it becomes more closer to the people. Decentralization is not about how we organize it in terms of electoral politics, in terms of how technology can enable to meet citizens where they are and their needs. The third piece quickly, of course, is enhanced citizen participation. And citizen participation with technology, we're all busy. We've seen now it's easy to be online, but online can be many ways. We have many channels now and multiple channels, whether it's WhatsApp or how citizens can be crowdsourced and how that data then becomes an enabler for direct democracy. Of course, the fifth area is align it with Sustainable Development Goals. We need an organizing principle, and I know all of us now are very much clear around SDGs. How do we ensure that everything that we do, whether we adopt technology, is also within planetary boundaries, and that we conserve the planet? Because technology can go either way, can help solve those challenges, but also can create more problems for the planet, just based on the amount of energy we are sapping, but also the e-waste that we are creating, and the footprints. The carbon footprints we're also extending when you're working on technology. The most challenging one, as we always say, is about mindset. So how do we ensure that we create a global mindset, an agile mindset, but also a learning mindset, so that we can be able to share practices and we're not replicating things that fail, but also we can actually learn from failure. The model that I want to really sort of spend a little bit time on is what you're increasingly seeing that Kenya has been part of, is something that I kind of lead in this space, is the Open Government Partnership, which is very much around principles around co-creation, principles around multi-stakeholder collaborative, because the business of government and governing and engaging citizens is not the business of government alone. It's an all-in effort for private sector, civil society, and government in a way that is not antagonistic, but are working together. And so this is sort of the largest network right now that we are seeing, that is of 79 governments, about 120 subnational governments, with a population of 2 billion, serving about 4,000 commitments. And you can see in about 10 years, it is possible when you leverage on technology to do this at scale across continents, and in a very equal and equitable way. What open government does is also kind of deepen a lot of these principles, because I think, as Harry mentioned, part of action is deepening a lot of these principles, especially how we are leveraging technology for smartness. In terms of Kenya, we are seeing how open government is kind of trying to push the needle around ensuring that government responds to what citizens think matters to them. Issues around beneficial ownership, and I know all of you are always interested to know who won that tender and who owned that company. So beneficial ownership register is something that we're seeing that is leveraging technology. Open contracting for companies here, I know you want tenders to be open so that they are not predetermined. Issues around open data, I hope this is something we can work with CEO to revive that platform in terms of ensuring that, again, after 10 years, we have a robust open data platform that is just not based on government data, but also has civil society data and private sector data. Because we've seen when you have some certain data sets that are interoperable, then it's useful in a way that you can deliver services to citizens. If we layer telco data and geospatial data, easy to understand, for example, traffic flows in Nairobi. Easy to understand, for instance, consumer patterns. Easy to understand spending patterns. Easy to understand how you need to prioritize and not wait for a 10-year census, because that probably will be time-bound. Issues around parliament and how parliament becomes open, how they pass laws in a very agile way. Issues of access to justice. Measuring public sector performance could be a way to actually improve trust to government. Of course, you can't do this without access to information. You can only do this in a way that is knowledge-driven. Of course, governing of the technology themselves, and I think this is an area of contestation we are seeing right now. How do you ensure that you govern technology in a way that does not stifle innovation, but also protects fundamental freedoms, and of course, ensuring that it's within planetary boundaries. So this is already in action, and it's happening in Kenya. What we are seeing as a world leader is what I think, and this is an overused experience, but I think I just wanted to bring it again, of countries that have seen government as a service. So government is not an institution that works for itself, but government sees itself as a service. So basically, a video like this, you can figure out how Estonia just figured out to ensure that government is online all the time, serves citizens inside Estonia, but at the same time can quickly scale to serve non-citizens out of Estonia. And basically, what you've seen is citizens can file taxes in 3 minutes because there's a way that all data is interoperable but compartmentalized in blocks so that not one entity can access that data. In terms of, they can, this is an interesting one, they can vote online in terms of trust. Watu wakufungua server tunajua, but basically you can understand that this is what digitizing trust is. Because when technology works, working with citizens in an area of collaboration between citizens and private sector, then trust is built over time, that then you can be able to leverage technology even for areas and specific instances where traditionally have been areas of contestation and trust. Let me end by this as we cue Phyllis's presentation. When we talk about citizen-centric services, we must invest on some certain foundations and fundamentals, and hoping that in these 2 days, we will actually not talk about the technology, but we'll talk about what do we need to put together so that at the end of the day, we can deliver those specific citizens in the personas that I mentioned in a way that then can enhance their experiences with government. The first thing, of course, is data and data systems. We can't do anything without data. Everything must be driven by data for decision-making and action. We must invest in infrastructure. And part of that infrastructure, we must be able to power that infrastructure, whether it's internet, whether it's connectivity, whether it's devices. We need to be able to charge our phones now that they are energy guzzlers. The idea of literacy at scale. We build technologies, but can citizens use them? We build services, can citizens access them and use them? So we need to invest in literacy. Agile governance in many ways is how do you ensure that governance is a whole multi-stakeholder ecosystem and experience so that governance in a way is not bureaucracy, but is very much for delivering services. And it's not government alone, but working private sector and civil society, because technology is not in the hands of government, but of private sector. In terms of sustainable finance, we know this. We cannot projectize government, and we cannot projectize services. what you give to citizens cannot be taken away. If you put out free Wi-Fi, we better be able to sustain that. If we put out services, around 12,000 services, in eCitizen, we need to be able to sustain that in a way that the finance that we put behind it is enabled and not with debt. So how do we think about innovative finance of technology and services that are provided through technology? The last one, of course, is partnerships and collaboration. And I want to end with that. It can never be overemphasized. It's about partnership. I have no idea what Phyllis is cooking behind Microsoft. And I cannot pretend that I can do what Phyllis does. And neither can I pretend to do what Konza is doing. But we can meet in the middle and say the best product, I can bring the best product that I have and connect with the best product that you have so that we can be able to deliver a unique experience by citizens. And it must be by design. And when I say that, I look at Munyala at the back. Let's talk about human-centered design. And so how do you ensure that design is really in this ecosystem? And so with that, I want to thank you and hope that that provides a context of what we talk about. As I said, if you're looking for me, Harry is your friend. We can be able to talk later. Thank you very much.